Cannabis residue was found inside the ancient temple at the Holy of Holies. The ancient Israelites, and these would have been people with a high priest status most likely at that time, they were burning weed inside the temple of Yahweh around 735 BC. Tellerad was an ancient Israelite fortress, and inside of that fortress they built a temple to Yahweh that matched the Jerusalem temple, basically. And at that place of worship there, that they called the Holy of Holies, they had two vertical stone altars. There was a big one and a slightly smaller one right next to it. The big altar represented Yahweh. This stone had thick residue built up from frankincense, which has always been a common incense that people use for the fragrance. The smaller stone pillar next to it represented the goddess Asherah. She was worshipped alongside Yahweh for hundreds of years. But on this smaller stone monument, they found thick residue that tested positive for THC, CBD, and CBN. There were also traces of animal fat and dung that would have been used to keep it burning, because around that area they really didn't have much wood or anything, so they used the dung to keep it burning. So they might have been hotboxing in the Holy of Holies, and the thick resin built up on the stone altars over time, and during the reform from Hezekiah and Josiah, they wanted to stop the idolatry and eliminate these sacred places of worship. So these spots were covered and the stones were deliberately tipped over face down and buried, which they did that to try to erase them from history, but ironically, that's what actually preserved them enough for the archaeologists to be able to test the residue. Now, there's no actual evidence anywhere around that area that cannabis cultivation was happening, so they weren't growing it at that time. It's definitely possible that it would have grew wild in that area, but it would have been used a lot in this temple. So archaeologists say it was probably imported either from Lebanon, Central Asia, or even Egypt maybe, where cannabis was used for medicine and rituals pretty often and pretty commonly. And there were trade routes from Judah to those places too, so that would make sense. Plenty of scholars have claimed for a long time that cannabis was prevalent in the Bible. The word cannabis comes from Greek, but in Assyrian it was kanabu, in Persian it was kanab, and in Arabic it was kunab. There's definitely an etymological connection there. But as the Jewish religion got more reformed over time and more strict, they started banning the use of psychedelics. And then this area of Tellerad wasn't really discovered and excavated until the 1960s. But back then, they didn't test these substances. So